It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Ian Rivers. And Ian, it's always a great day to be a Beaver, but some weekends more than others. And this is a weekend that's more than others, probably, because there's a lot of, we're going to try and keep it optimistic, but there's some bad news we got to get to. And there's some also not great news. Let's start off with some real not great news, and that stems in the football program. Bemidji State's football season, of course, came to an end. Best season in program history if you're talking about postseason success. And one of the big reasons for that, of course, was Marcus Hansen on the defensive side, former NSIC Defender of the Year. And we were hit with some pretty devastating news last week, Ian.
Yeah, Marcus put his name into the transfer portal. And honestly, it's, I don't know. Initially, yeah, obviously you're disappointed because Marcus is such a good player and he's been such a good player for this program. But, you got to think about the fact that I think that it's mostly him just trying to jump up and, make a name for himself, try to prove that he can play at Division I level. I think that's what he's trying to go for, maybe FCS or Group of 5 school. And there's so many other factors that might play into it, and it's all stuff that, we haven't talked to Marcus directly about, but he's a guy, we had him on here last year, and he's obviously a guy who's got more on his plate than just football. And so this might be something that, is benefiting him after football. He was big into, he had his job at Sanford Health, and maybe if he, that could be a big part of it too. If he found an opportunity somewhere else that, is going to help benefit his life after football, then that could be another reason that he, is throwing his name into the ring. It's not necessarily all just, hey, I want to play somewhere else. Like you said, NIL, maybe, he's trying to get to a Division I program, make a little buck, a little bit more of a buck, whatever it is. There's plenty of reasons. So hopefully, like we, kind of talked about pre-show, it is him jumping up to a higher level. It will be a little disappointing if you see him end up at another Division II powerhouse or something like that. But either way, you just hope he's doing what's best for him, and that's what the portal's for, right? As much as we don't like it as fans, you hope that the players can use it to the best of their abilities to help better their own life or football career, whatever it is, and hopefully it works out for Marcus.
Right, and I think you made a good point there. Is the fact of it's, and the portal, we're so early in the portal era that and we talked about this a lot during hockey season too, but. I think with that, yeah, the intrusive thoughts are always like, oh, is he leaving to like make a lateral move to like, God forbid, like another NSIC school? Like that would be the doomsday scenario. But yeah, this really feels like a guy that's, I mean, honestly, he could look at his list and say, well, I've already won NSIC Defender of the Year. We've already made a couple postseason runs. Like I've maybe proven all I've needed to prove in the NSIC and to Bemidji State that like I am a great defender, and let me go see if I have a chance to prove that I could play at another higher level. And as much as it stings to be a Beaver fan because you'd like to have him for another year or two in your program and leading your defense, that there's a couple different ways to look at it, right? Like, it stinks that you lose a player like that. And, this is a lot of spin. This is a lot of cope. This is a lot of whatever. But you know what, to say that, hey, our program sends people to higher levels. Like if you come here, have success early, there's a chance you could jump up. Like this program makes people successful. Well, that's not the worst thing in the world to have your program be. You had a guy enter the portal, not because he's unhappy in Bemidji. And I don't know, we haven't talked to Marcus since he came on the podcast, so we don't have any like inside information, but highly unlikely to think that it's like an unamicable situation where he had to leave. This is just a guy who thought, looking at it from the outside looking in, it's a guy who thought, hey, maybe I could play at an FCS level. Maybe I could play at a MAC school or a Sunbelt or whatever, any kind of those Group of 5 conferences, and just put your name out there and see what happens. And really tough to lose a guy like Marcus. And it's a good point you brought up, Ian, with the fact that he did do all that extra stuff. I mean, go back and listen to that podcast from a year ago, last fall. he talked about doing that stuff for Stanford, like you said, and wanting to go into medicine and in some of that stuff. And that's pretty ambitious. And he was doing a lot of stuff. He wasn't just here for football. That guy was there to prepare himself for life after football. And it's, he's a dude that's definitely thought this through. This isn't a guy just jumping ship for the sake of jumping ship. So we wish Marcus the best, man. We hope that maybe transfers back to Bemidji, but at the end of the day, like if he goes on and can do something on, for one of those schools and we see him on ESPN on a Saturday next fall, that also would be kind of cool to get to say. So, it happens and you just got to thank him for the time he was here and hope that there are a couple other guys that are ready to take his spot, because the defense was more than just one guy. So this is still a team that's going to return some good players and whatnot. It doesn't help, but you're not going to be up a creek without a paddle kind of sort of thing. It's tough to see him go, but you know what, like you said, we wish him the best and we'll kind of see what happens. That's pretty much the major portal news. I'm sure there's been some other portal action for Bemidji State that we haven't quite tabbed down yet, but that's kind of the most notable one for the football program. And I'm not sure when the window closes for when you can announce your transfer portal and all that, but we'll kind of monitor it as this situation goes.
And one more little comment. I think it's just important to remember that it's similar to, I think, the Leighton Road and honestly kind of the Eric Polkamp transfer as well, because it hurts a little bit more at the hockey level because Bemidji State is Division I. They are playing at what is supposed to be the pinnacle of college hockey, right? You're a college hockey program in the state of Minnesota. And so imagining that this isn't the best place that a player could be at to develop their game for the pro level is a lot harder to grasp, where, maybe Eric Polkamp is getting told by the Sharks organization, well, we want you to play at Denver, in, that program and against those programs like Duluth and St. Cloud consistently and North Dakota. Interestingly enough, I named 3 of the teams that Bemidji State also played this year, but you know what I'm saying? And it's exactly like the Leighton Road thing where it's like, man, it really sucks to lose him, but it's pretty cool if that's actually what it is for Marcus and he does make a jump up and joins a group of 5 program, or FBS, he goes to Ohio State, screw it, wherever he ends up, if it's at the Division I level, if that's what he's gaining out of this is trying to improve his standing and giving himself a better shot. Not everybody has to go the Gunnar Olszewski or the CJ Ham or the Trey Pipkins route and play Division II football. Some people do want to jump up and get noticed that way. So especially at the Division II level, if you're able to have a player that's so good that he's trying to jump up to Division I and make the jump that way, then hey, I think you kind of have to take it as kind of a little pin in your hat, I guess, as a program, saying that you can develop players that way. But hey, we don't even know, I guess, if that's the reason that he's leaving. But
it's all speculation.
It's all speculation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, he's a guy that wants to do some other stuff after football, medical field. It's a lot of money. I'm sure he's got some scholarships from undergrad, but you got to go to grad school. It's going to be a lot of money. Is it, hey, if I can get a little something, maybe that helps my school, whatever. I don't know. But all we know is Marcus Hansen's in the transfer portal. Wish him the best. And honestly, thankful for the stuff he gave up Bemidji. We're thankful for him coming on the podcast last year. And you know what? Go do some stuff, I guess, is the best way to say it. And we'll kind of monitor things throughout the next few weeks. Let's flip things over and let's just go right into hockey, and let's go right into hockey and get this thing over with. Men's hockey over the weekend. This was a very, very winnable series against Tech. And they had a chance on Friday night to get all the points. And then once again, in the final minute, they let a team score, and to lose, take to overtime, whatever. Bemidji State gives up another end of period goal. It sends them to overtime. Bemidji State does take the shootout, but that's disappointing in and of itself. But you're like, whatever. If you come back and play well on Saturday and you get a win, we'll forgive it. Like we'll say, hey, not ideal, but whatever. You got what you could out of the weekend. And to lay an egg like they did on Saturday, just I didn't catch the game on Saturday. All I saw was the final score from Jared of the Bemidji Pioneer, and just whoa, that's not good. So Ian, kind of take me through this weekend. What the heck happened?
I mean, I'm just as clueless as you. I had plans on Saturday night myself, and I was like, oh man, I hate it. I don't like missing Beaver hockey games, especially when that subscription package is such a beefy one per month. You feel like you want to get every game out of it to
Right.
make it worth your while. But yeah, I mean, Friday night, just another disappointing way to, it's flashes of a couple of years ago where you give up a late goal, and they've done it several times this year. They have extra attacker goals have beat them, I think, at least 3 times now this season. Once against Minnesota, once against North Dakota, and now once against Michigan Tech. The benefit is, or was against Minnesota and North Dakota, that you had a 2-goal lead at the time. So giving up that first extra attacker goal just made it a 1-goal deficit, and you ended up holding on and winning both of those games. Anyways, this time you didn't have that. And I don't know what it is. If they are just so scared, they looked terrified to throw the puck. Some games it's like, all right, dude, maybe we should try to break it out of the zone instead of just blindly chucking it at the net. But in this game, they just didn't want to throw it towards an open, empty net. I mean, it took Michigan Tech a couple of minutes to score that goal. We had plenty of chances to hit that empty net, and we've been terrible at it this year outside of Dante Lawson's with like 13 seconds left against UNT. But it's just very frustrating to give up that point, especially considering the fact that you're going to go in the next night and after one period, you looked like, okay, cool. Yeah, we should have won last night. It's just a little blip. We're up 2-0 after the first period here. And then you lose the rest of the game 9-3. I honestly don't remember the last time. I don't know if I've seen this team give up 9 goals in a game.
I'll go back and look because it's been wild.
That's absurd, dude.
Especially considering you shut them out in the first period. Like, to let just a complete meltdown.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about it last week of football. Of all teams, it had to be Mankato. Of all teams, you had to melt yourself down to Tech. After the Mason Cup championship, it's the first time they've came back into the building, and you play just a dud of a series. A lot of those guys were on that team last year. To see that,
that's the most disappointing thing, I think, is just, I believe Lucas put a tweet out that said, like, for this season to start the way it has is very disappointing. Yeah. I mean, how much stock can you put in the fact that you lost Leighton Road and Eric Polkamp and Kyle Loft? That's a ton of points, dude. Maybe we undersold that. Maybe we oversold the fact that some of these guys could come in and make big jumps, and we haven't had those guys make that big of a jump yet. Issa Parek has come in and looked good as a freshman. I think we've seen good weekends individually from almost any player. I can't think of a single player that's truly disappointed me like 100% this season. There's weekends for every player that look really good, and there's weekends for every player that have looked really bad. And it's frustrating because this is a team you felt like could come in and challenge in a conference that was still pretty unproven. I don't feel that way anymore. I mean, we've had the ability to kind of take something from every weekend, right? Like, Lake State was a little disappointing, but you know what? We got 3 points. They were leading the CCHA when we, faced off against them. Ferris, we did the old loop around and we're like, well, yeah, it's Ferris, but we suck at playing in Ferris. So 3 points, I guess, is pretty good. We've done it for every series. This is the only one now where I feel like maybe we've been a little bit too nice to this team. And they're just completely mid. I mean, they're 8-3. That's 100% 500. And it's difficult, man. I don't know. The standings right now, dude, are so weird. You're 6th in the CCHA heading into the Christmas break. You're 500 in the conference, though. And I feel like that's brutal to be 500 and be 6th out of 9 teams. But when there's teams like Northern Michigan at the bottom that are weighing down the bottom of the standings that much, I mean, there's bound to be some teams that are up over the top of you. I think it's about time we kind of adjust our expectations for the second half now. We've kind of been like, all right, this is how we got to stay on track. And I don't think it's impossible for the Beavers to win the McNaughton Cup still. But with the way that Mankato is playing, they're at 80%, 80.6% of the points they've collected, 29 points through 12 games. The Beavers are 11 points behind them at 18 points through 12 games. And just with what we've seen so far through these two, for these two teams over the first 3 months of the season, Bemidji's got a great opportunity to come out and get a lot of points in the next month following, their little break here of 2 weeks now. Bowling Green, Northern Michigan, St. Thomas, and Ferris State. Those are teams that are in literally besides you. That's the entire bottom half of the conference right there. Bowling Green is 5th, Bemidji is 6th, Ferris is 7th, St. Thomas is 8th, and Northern Michigan is 9th. You can pick up plenty of points there. And if they do, then maybe we can talk about, making another run at the McNaughton, depending on how Mankato does in the second half, and Augustana. But right now, I think this team needs to focus up and focus on getting home ice in the CCHA playoffs here, and trying to get maybe the 2 or the 3 seed so that they can avoid, maybe, if you're a 2 or 3 seed, you have a chance at, a second home game in the playoffs, and then maybe the top seed gets upset, you can still host again. But at this point, honestly, they just got to focus on playing good hockey, because for a team that struggled offensively, scoring 5 goals in a game is awesome. But you let up nine goals.
And by the way, I've been doing a little research here while you've been ranting, so I'll give you a chance to catch your breath here a little bit. That I haven't found a 9-goal performance yet, but if you remember, they did give up 8 goals way back in November of 2017.
I was at that game.
Yeah, Dickman got the hat trick. They still lost 8-6 to Mankato. That was the last time. That's the last time I found where they've had some few 7-goal performances.
They gave up 6 last year to Mankato in that crazy game, but 9 is unbelievable. And I get one of them was an empty netter, but I mean, that's just not gonna cut it, man. I've never seen.
At least you saw one team get an empty net over the
weekend. Right?
I mean, that's about it. Like, and going back to the empty net conversation here, I was watching those final couple minutes of Friday night's game, and like you said, like it just felt like they couldn't find the net. And I get it; it's harder than it looks. Like to get a clean shot to the net, and it's like shooting a wide open 3. It feels easy. There's a little extra pressure. I get it. There's some stuff in there, but it just felt like, I don't know, maybe I'm misreading the situation. So I'm completely acceptable with like having a stupid take here, but it just felt like every time they were more concerned with just kind of hitting it to the other end than it was at actually getting a good shot on goal, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I looked at it. I have no hockey mind. So, whatever. Like I get it also. They have extra skaters on the ice. Just try and run out the clock also. But I don't know, man. I think
I felt like they weren't being aggressive enough on their. It's essentially a penalty kill, right? But it's like a 6-on-5 is not a 5-on-4, right? That you would see on a normal. There's a lot of bodies out there, and you can afford to send guys and be more aggressive. They were kind of just letting Michigan Tech pass it around the point, and they had that great game on Friday where they blocked like 27 shots or something like that, which was phenomenal. But it kind of seemed like they were just like, just get in the way of the shot. We've got 6 goaltenders out there between all of our players, and then Matthias Scholl. Like, go and put some pressure on the point man and try to make them force a bad pass. Like, you're just letting them do whatever they want out there. And eventually 2 minutes and 18 seconds or whatever it was is too long to keep playing like that. Like, your special teams are not that good this year to just keep relying on that type of thing. It felt like they were just letting them take space too easily. And I totally get that if you're up the 2 goals, like we're up 2 goals, let them keep passing along the point on the blue line. We don't care. Take an extra 15 seconds every time. That's totally fine. You're down 2 goals. If they're down 1 goal, you got to be a little bit more aggressive and try to chase pucks. And, I get you don't want to get overexposed on the backside because but
I mean,
you still did. You still did. You let up a goal. So.
And that's the thing. There's a couple things that would make this different. It'd be different. One, execution. If they just execute it, then who cares? It's like, do they go for it on 4th down? Do they onside kick it? Do they whatever? Well, teams that just execute it, there's really not much of a conversation, right? Because they executed, so who cares if it was the right call, the wrong call? They got the result they were looking for. And it's kind of the same thing. Like we can sit here and overanalyze, and they can go, hey, you're probably overanalyzing. I mean, look, 9 times out of 10, like, this is the right approach. And maybe that's true, but it's the fact that this has happened over and over again. And not just with the extra man, but also with the fact of end of period goals have been something that this team has struggled with for years. I mean, a couple of years ago, it felt like every other game they were giving up a goal at the end of a period when it looked like they had momentum going into the locker room. And then every time it's all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I guess the game is tied now, or I guess we're losing. Like, it's just been one of those things where that's been an issue on this team. I can't pinpoint exactly why that's happening. And maybe it's just unlucky. Maybe that's true. But also, it just seems to be happening a lot where I get that fluky goals can happen. Fluky goals happen all the time in hockey. But when it happens this much, I don't know how much it'd be a quote-unquote fluky situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, last year it wasn't as much of a problem, but last year we also had and it's so weird. Like, last year's team and this year's team feel like they're kind of on the same path. I mean, this year you're 8-3 going into this. You were like 6 games under 500 approaching the end of the year, where like we made that huge stretch run last year or something like that. And yet I feel like we're in such a worse spot.
Right.
And it's like,
this team has much better wins, by the way, out of conference than last year's team did. Last year's team got pounded out of conference. And this year's team has beat the Gophers. They've ran with the Gophers at Mariucci. They took, they went to the Ralph and went to overtime and all this kind of, or I can't remember, played them tough, whatever it was. They beat UND though on your home ice. Like, you had so much good things happen out of conference, and it's those stumbles in conference that just have completely taken the wind out of the sails of any of the accomplishments it's felt like they've rightfully earned over the first couple months of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a very negative weekend. Listen, they're still in a not a terrible spot. Like
you said,
large, I can't imagine that at large bid is like on the table now. I mean, you kind of needed to avoid having a losing weekend. You ended with a tie and a loss this weekend. And of course, how bad the loss is doesn't matter. It's a loss is a loss in terms of pairwise. But I mean, you've got another chance at it here with, Duluth in 2 weeks on a Tuesday. They play on, of course, New Year's Eve. We'll talk about that game in a couple of weeks. But I mean, yeah, it's difficult, man. And we'll kind of reassess after the holiday break. They've got 1 game in the next month.
The news is they do have a chance to kind of figure some things out. They have some time to just kind of get back to basics a little bit.
Right. And this isn't a conference that's so difficult that you're like, if you were in the Big Ten and you're playing like crap, you're like, oh my God, like, where are we going to make up points? We got to play Michigan State this weekend. And then, oh man, is our easy weekend Wisconsin, like at home? Like, no, you've got games that if you play well, you can win. Like, there's winnable games all over this schedule. It's just a matter of, will they actually come out and play 2 consistent games back to back? They have not shown us that they can do that many times this year. Maybe outside of the St. Thomas series or North Dakota, I guess. They played pretty well for that 3-week stretch, Minnesota, St. Thomas, North Dakota. And now we've kind of seen them fall back to earth. And I think that's the most disappointing part is you felt like that Minnesota win was where they were starting to turn the corner.
Right.
You're like, this is it. This is kind of the thing that's going to boost us now. And
it was followed by a
kind
weekend against St. Thomas. You had a great weekend against North Dakota.
Yep.
And then the Lake State.
You win 4-2 on Friday, and then the last 3 games have been can't keep yourselves off the penalty kill against Lake State, and you lose that game 3-4. Give up a late goal and tie. Yeah, you got the extra point in a shootout against Michigan Tech, but you really should have had 3 points from that game. and then an absolute collapse in the second and third periods of, honestly, it was mostly just the third period. I mean, the second period was, I think.
Third period's not ideal, but you at least had time to recover.
Yeah, it was 3-3 at the end of the second.
Right.
No, fourth. Yeah, 3-3. And then they took a 4-3 lead at the beginning of the third. And then from there, it was like 4 straight goals for Michigan Tech. It just, that type of game cannot happen if you want to actually contend in this conference. And I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but it sucks because this is like, it's like losing a game in the NFL going into your bye week. You have to just sit with it for now a month. And, God forbid we don't come out and play a good game on New Year's Eve against Minnesota Duluth. Oh my gosh, that's going to be it's a great opportunity to go over 500 in non-conference play with a tough schedule, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
Tough schedule. It's not like they're playing Mercyhurst and Alaska Anchorage or what. No, these are good teams that you're going to be playing out of conference, and to go 4-3-1 would be awesome. Of course, they have to come out and beat Duluth, which would help kind of take the sting of this weekend away. But
and I wonder how much differently we look at this if Bemidji State hangs on and wins 3-2 on Friday night. Like, it's not ideal. I don't think we're like happy about it, but I think there's less like sky is falling feeling, because at least you got a point and you're like, not ideal. We can salvage this, but it's just the way, and it maybe isn't even a points conversation. It's just a vibe check around this team. The vibes are off right now.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. It definitely would be a little better if you didn't have, like we said, it's 3 games in a row now where you've kind of shot yourself in the foot in some way, shape, or form. And it would still suck because like 5-9 on home ice against that team, it's like, when are we going to put a consistent weekend together? But you're right, it wouldn't be as bad. But I still think, especially with that being the Saturday game, and it's just like, dude, when are we going to
be a little better, but they wouldn't necessarily be great.
Yeah. So I don't know. It
is
a lot still can change. It is a long season. Of course, last year, I mean, it's hard to say that this team can turn it around, because last year what we were dealing with was crazy injuries and, people at the World Junior Tournament for a stretch of games. And then we got them all back at the right time and got healthy. This year we've been fairly healthy. And Riley Funk is a good centerman. I don't know that Riley Funk is fixing the issue on Saturday night there. But you never know. Hopefully he's got some time now over the next month or so to get healthy, and he can be back in time, at least for that Bowling Green series come mid-January.
Right.
So,
Minnesota Duluth New Year's Eve, Manitoba exhibition January 3rd, and like you said, January 10th and 11th at Bowling Green, and then they kind of get back into a roll.
Another one that sucks, man. And we'll talk about more about that, obviously, in future shows. But playing at Slater Ice Arena is never – I don't know that I've ever – we rarely do it. I feel like that's the one trip we like make once every like 2 years or 3 years. But it is – I don't know that I've ever seen them go in there and get a sweep. And so that's going to be a very difficult test coming off of potentially a very long month, depending on how that Duluth game goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a very, very daunting road trip, but
we'll see. Things not much better on the women's hockey front. We talked about how, hey, Mankato, they've gotten better, but maybe this is a weekend you can come in and challenge them and see what you can do against them. And, we've talked about the goaltending and how at the beginning of the year, it looked really strong, and it's kind of just not the best weekend. Give up 10 goals to a 5-0 loss on Friday. And then Saturday you lose 5-3. Minnesota State's receiving votes. They're a solid women's hockey team, and you just drop those points. They're on the road. You're down in Mankato. It is what it is. But that team just, again, trying to find some consistency, trying to kind of feel like you're building momentum as the year goes on. And like the men's team, the women are going to be off for a little bit. They'll play New Year's Day. They're going to play in Lakeville at Lakeville House Arena for the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame Museum Face-Off Classic. That'll be against the Gophers again on New Year's Day. And then Friday, Saturday, they're at the University of Minnesota Showcase. So they're down still in Minneapolis, or down in the Twin Cities, I should say. And then they play Penn State Friday, Brown on Saturday. So before jumping back in January 10th and 11th, you go to Ohio State. So it's, again, a lot of waiting here, a little bit of a break to kind of lick some wounds and to see what you can do. But then, unlike the men's where they do have to play Duluth, and that's a tough opponent, but then you have Manitoba, and then you kind of get a break. You got Penn State, Brown, and a couple of these other schools that I don't have their records in front of me, but you playing the Gophers is still never an easy task.
Yeah, and I think this is another weekend where definitely a little disappointing. 0-5 loss, even on the road, to a Mankato team that, they split with St. Thomas this year, so it's not like they're not beatable. We've beaten St. Thomas, and if St. Thomas has beaten them, that's transitive property. But Saturday felt a lot better. It felt like you didn't get the defense you wanted. It's kind of been something you have hung your hat on in games at times this year, is better defending, and to give up 10 goals across 2 games to a Mankato team that isn't at the top of the conference does really stink. Want to say congrats to Morgan Smith for her hat trick on Saturday night. 2 power play goals, and I believe she was named something of the week. WCHA Rookie of the Week. Yes, that's what it was for Morgan Smith on the back. Yep, on the back of the hat trick there. So that's good to see. We're going to need some offensive players to start stepping up. Hopefully Morgan can be one of those going forward as we try to build this roster out and build this team out. It's WCHA. It's very hard to be competitive, and especially when you can't be competitive against the teams that are kind of in the bottom echelon. And I know Mankato's kind of pulled away over the last 2 years or so from that bottom echelon where Bemidji and St. Thomas are currently sitting.
Over the middle, yeah.
They're starting to kind of get closer to St. Cloud, but they're still kind of in a tier of their own there in 6th place. But yeah, to still feel so far away from that gap even is frustrating. But I think that it's important to see some results and to be able to have a bounce back result where you at least play a competitive 3-5 game after, kind of getting spanked 5-0 on Friday afternoon is good. Hopefully this team can stay pretty healthy. I know that Chase just put something in the Discord earlier this afternoon about, here, let me pull it up quick.
Which, by the way, join the Beaver Banter Discord.
Yes, join the Beaver Banter Discord. It has to do with Josie Bothan, the goaltender for the women's hockey team, who hasn't gotten much run this season because of injury, and unfortunately, I believe is going to be hanging it up because of all those injuries. Just posted on Instagram earlier today that it's just been too much. So that sucks. You never, ever want that to happen. Of course, she's a graduate student, came back for her 5th year, trying to make a push with this team, and it hasn't worked out, unfortunately, for her. So, yeah.
At any stage, medically retiring is just it's not fun. I've known people personally who've had to medically retire from college athletics. It's tough because it feels like, at least when you graduate, you're kind of being forced to. But when you have to make that call yourself that, like, I'm done playing, and it's not for any, like, lost fun in the sport, whatever, just maybe decided that it's a time for a new role. Like, injuries kind of force you to, where it feels like that's pushing you out. It's tough. But, you got to do what you got to do. I get it. They pile up. And if you're almost done anyways, or maybe if it's like by the time you get healthy, it's mid-February. And then at that point, it's like, is it worth rushing yourself back to whatever? I don't know what the situation is specifically, obviously, but that's a tough scene. So that sucks for her, but best of luck in what's next. And now Bemidji State, again, kind of goaltending's been something they've kind of had to kind of do on the fly all year long, and kind of have to keep doing that.
Yeah. Yep. And just like men's hockey, they have a little bit of a break here. And we'll come back and we'll talk about their matchup against the Gophers, and then their little tournament that they're playing in out east, I believe, in a couple of weeks. So
women's they're playing the tournament in Minnesota.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's down in Minnesota.
Okay. Never mind. I thought it was just the game against the Gophers that was like the Mariucci Classic or something like that. But
No, they're
and I,
playing.
of course, don't have the schedule in front of me anymore, so I just
No, I
took
just pulled it up here.
a
Yeah,
guess.
I don't. When they say
Awesome.
Minneapolis, I'm guessing that's Ritter. I'm guessing that's where they're playing, but
Yeah, probably. I would have to imagine.
I would have to guess. Anyway, we'll see. Moving things over, let's start out. Let's talk a little women's basketball. Over the weekend for Bemidji State, conference play is rolling on. Over the weekend, they had the first home conference series against Northern State and Moorhead, and they lost to Northern State rather on Friday night, 77-60. Looking at a little bit of some of the final stuff here, Northern shot 50% from the field. It not a lot too from the 3-point range. They only shot 10% in Northern from 3. But again, and I didn't get a chance to like sit down and watch the game. So if I'm misconstruing anything, forgive me. But when you have 50% from the field, 10% from 3, that probably tells you they were able to get it down low and were able to play basketball down on the block and were able to dominate that way. And that's just a tough one to go. Bemidji State shot 40% from the field, 32% from 3. Aaron Barrett leading things with 19 points, Rachel Koenig with 10, and kind of the leading scorers in that one. That's really the main takeaway from Friday night's game. Looking at Saturday, once again, about 38% shooting from Moorhead, a little bit better, but the 3-point shot about 31.5% from the field. Rebounds, Bemidji State got a rebounded 41-25. Beavers had 12 turnovers overall compared to Moorhead's 8. And that's kind of the thing. Aaron Barrett led the way with 10 points there as Bemidji State wraps up that weekend in NSIC play at home. But I think that's kind of the main takeaways from those two games. Anything else you kind of noticed from that, Ian?
No, not a ton. Bemidji's still looking for their first conference win. It's felt like it's not been super close to happening. I know they went to overtime against Minnesota Crookston in their first conference game, but yeah, Moorhead and Northern State both in the top half of the conference right now. Bemidji State sitting second to last, just above Augustana, and that's a technicality because Augustana is 0-5 and Bemidji's only 0-4. So a couple of decent opportunities. I mean, St. Cloud State right now 6-3. They're a top 4 team in the conference, and UMary in 6th, 2-2 and 5-2 overall. So we'll see. I mean, this the program is not where they would like to be, but last year they kind of did at the end make a little bit of noise and picked up a few wins. So we'll see. I think at any point this team can start clicking and put a weekend together.
Well, like Alex said too, Alex Faber, Bemidji Pioneer. We had him on a couple weeks ago, and he talked a little men's and women's basketball. Some new stuff that the women's team's rolling out, little new philosophy changes to the extent of which, obviously, maybe it's, maybe I'm making too big of a deal about this, but you roll out some new stuff. It's going to be a few clunks kind of in the road as you try and smooth out some of the newer things you want to implement and some of the things. It's going to take a lot of game reps before you really feel like you hit your stride. So like you said, we'll just kind of monitor that and see if they can develop as the year goes on. Looking over at the men's basketball side, Ian, they finally got their first conference win. I say finally, it's the second weekend, but last weekend, it felt like they had a chance to pick up a couple, and they lost by a combined 3 points. They did get their first win on Friday night. They played Northern State, and it went down to the wire at the BSU Gymnasium. A late shot helped Bemidji State get the big win overall when towards the end of the second half, putting things in. Jalen Patterson got the tip in late, and he led everybody in scoring with 20 points, and they got their first conference win of the year. Just a good performance for Bemidji State, able to get that first one. Now, Northern is 1-7 on the year. They're 0-3 in the conference. So, it's a little down to the wire with the team. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily think you would be if you're talking your preseason expectations, but you got the win. You move on. You figure out what comes next. Then you play a good Dragons team on Saturday, and then you lose 81-74. Again, put up a good effort. You had a chance. But really, that first half performance is what sunk them. They were down 43-25 at half. Got hot in the second half, but too little too late. And I think that's really kind of the story of the game for Bemidji State. Eventually, I mean, they were hitting about 50% from the field, 40% from three when it was all said and done. But just kind of came down to that first half being as bad as it was. And again, I didn't get a chance on Saturday to see everything. So I can't tell you if it's, hey, they were hitting shots left and right in the second half, whereas the first half they just missed, or if it was they couldn't get the shots they wanted in the first half, whatever. But that's the way that this kind of ends for Bemidji State over the weekend. Jaron Mayo had 22 points. John Pekarich had 19, leading things. Tate Olson, 9. Daxton Daly, 8 points over the weekend. You got to split. You were able to do what you had to do, but it's still just kind of, in terms of instilling confidence, you're not quite there yet, I think. And I think we're holding this team to a little bit higher standard because we've seen the talent over the last couple of years. We're kind of waiting for them to break out and string some wins together.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see how this team can play once John Sutherland comes back, because we still haven't seen him yet this season. Yeah, the game against Northern, coming down to it, Northern 1-9 overall this season now. They were 1-7 at the start of that game against Bemidji. Now 1-9 after getting swept this weekend. That Crookston game is looking really, really bad. 2-8 is Crookston on the year, and blowing that lead to them at the end was certainly not ideal. And that Minot State game, I mean, how close were you to beating Minot State, who is currently undefeated 13-0 on the season? Yeah, and and they played pretty well in the second half. They shot about 56% in the second half against MSU Moorhead. And yeah, like you said, the first half was just too bad, and the comeback effort fell short in the end because they just had too deep a hole to climb out of against a team in Moorhead who's 9-1 on the season. You can't really afford to do that. They do have an opportunity this weekend.
Last year, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have an opportunity. This weekend's got to be one where you're looking at it. St. Cloud State and UMary, just a couple teams that are right above you. St. Cloud State 6-6 overall. UMary 4-9. Both teams are 2-2 in conference play. Both teams are going to be teams that are fighting it out with you for playoff positioning come the end of the year. And especially if you want a home court first round game, or if you're fighting for, God forbid, if you're fighting for a bye there at the end of the season, you're trying to get a top 4 spot. These are teams that are going to be right around that area. And they're teams that were right around. St. Cloud State was one of the teams that was right around Bemidji's area in the standings last year, I believe. As I tab back just very quickly to look at that. Yeah, it's just, these are games that are very important, and it stinks. Every weekend without John Sutherland is just a little bit further. You got to go. But if Bemidji can pick up a sweep this weekend, get to 3-3 on conference play. I guess it's not this weekend. It's games are Thursday, Saturday this week or something like that. Yeah, Thursday, Saturday. So
so just Thursday this week for St. Cloud's, or Thursday, Saturday, sorry. And then they don't play until the new year. So a little bit different setup, and logistically, I'm not sure why it's set up that way, but you get one at the BSU Gymnasium Thursday, you hit the road and go to Bismarck Saturday, and you kind of figure it out.
Yeah. And I believe next week we will be off just because this basketball is the only thing that's going on, and we could come back and talk exclusively about just men's and women's basketball, but I feel like that would only be about a 20-minute episode, and
there's got to be
the holidays anyways. Christmas Eve is on a Tuesday, and that's usually when we record.
Like, if they beat them by like 50, I'll jump on and talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if they have crazy good result,
something crazy's got to happen.
Exactly.
Shot from the opposing free throw line for the win.
Yeah. Well, if there's something crazy that happens, we'll definitely hop back on for like a short little recap or something. But overall, most likely we'll come back 2 weeks from now and recap those games and look forward to the games that follow the holiday break in early January and talk a little bit more about some men's and women's hockey previews for the Duluth and Minnesota games. So as of right now, kind of expect us to be back in 2 weeks. But yeah, I don't know if we're necessarily wrapping up the show yet. I just wanted to kind of bring that out so that people are kind of prepared. I think we've covered most of it.
I think we've gotten it.
A lot of was not an ideal weekend going 1-6-1 as a university, and at least across the major sports. There may be something else, that had to happen.
We thank you for sticking with us, or maybe this is like you just want to hear somebody else say, "Man, that weekend sucked."
Yeah.
Just to like get it out of your system. It's done, and then now we move on and we cheer for the Beavers again next weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So.
With some of we feel like we're critical of this team at times, but that's because, like with a men's hockey, with a little bit of men's basketball too, on a different scale, there's some expectations for those teams to win some games throughout the year. And when that doesn't happen, it's frustrating because we are like, oh man, we thought, and again, there's still plenty of season left. This is not an indictment of a year overall, but it's just like, oh man, we thought maybe they would be able to win that one, or, it was in the palm of their hand and they let it go or whatever. So, these teams are good. We have some expectations for some of these Beaver teams, and when they don't hit them, it can be frustrating. Doesn't mean we still won't be back here if they, beat Duluth or something like that. We'll be like, you know what? NCAA tournament's back on, baby. Here we go. Full steam ahead. So we'll see what happens.
Well, the good news is in a conference like the CCHA, the important thing is playing your best hockey once March rolls around, because you could go as bad as you are, and if you win the Mason Cup, you're in the dance regardless. So that's kind of the beauty of college sports in this format. But right. Yeah, Mitch Wolf, by the way, I forgot about this, named CCHA Defenseman of the Week. Bizarre to me that a team that gave up 9 goals in one game on the weekend has a Defenseman of the Week. But Mitch did play a hell of a weekend. And honestly, Patrick Satisari, again, we brought up his name last week with a good Lake State series. He added a couple more points, including another goal, I believe, on Saturday. He's continued kind of his good play as well. So congrats to Mitch, and good weekend for Patrick Satisari as well. Just wanted to throw that in there because I saw the headline and I forgot about it earlier.
Yeah, I think we're good for 2024. That's going to wrap things up. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that good stuff to you guys listening. It's been another great year of Beaver Banter, ready to kick it strong in 2025. Enjoy your holiday break, and we'll catch you guys next time. This is the Beaver Banter Podcast.